Hi, this is in United States. Today we are going to show you the family tree of Donald Trump, the 45th and 47th President of the United States. Let's start with the surname Trump, which is related to the words trumpet and drum. These words in turn go back to the word triumph, which in Roman times refers to a special type of victory parade. For many years, Donald Trump claimed that his paternal ancestors came from Sweden. In fact, this is what he stated in his 1987 book, The Art of the Deal. However, we now know that his maternal ancestors actually came from Germany, from a small town in Bavaria called Kolstadt. It was there that his great-great-grandfather John Paul Trump lived. Interestingly, Johann Paul Trump is also an ancestor of the Heinz family film for their famous ketchup. You see, Johann Paul's daughter Charlotte married a Heinz, and her son John immigrated to the US, where his son Henry went on to found behind his ketchup company. But we're more concerned with Johann Paul's son Johannes, who have a son named Christian, who married Katarina Kolber. They were the parents of Frederick, who at the young age of 16 moved to the United States in order to escape military service in Germany. He initially worked in New York as a boarder, but then 1891 moved to Seattle, which at the time was still a frontier town. There he bought and ran Dom 4, which also operated as a brothel. Several years later, during the Klondike Gold Rock, he moved up to the Yukon, where he continued to sell liquor and access to prostitutes, becoming rich in the process. Then in 1901, he ended up back in his hometown in Germany. They married the next year and initially moved to New York, but then back to Bavaria, where they decided to settle. However, when the Bavarian government found out that Friedrich had been draft dodger, they banished from the country, so the couple had to settle in New York after all, which is where their 3 children were. Born in New York, Friedrich invested his ill-gotten gains northwest into real estate. But then in 1918, at the age of 49, he mysteriously dropped dead. His family would later learn that he was one of the first cases of the Spanish flu, which went on to become the deadliest pandemic in history during the 1920s. Elizabeth continued to run the family business under the name E. Trump, and then later E. Trump and Son, that son being her eldest. Fred Trump, her other son, John, instead went on to become a science at Mert. I'll come back to John Trump a little later. For now, I want to point out Betty Trump, Fred and John Boulder's sister. She married a William Walter and had a son named John Culture, who became the mayor of a small village on Long Island. Brad, however, is the one that we're most interested in, being that he was the father of Donald Trump. Once he turned 21, he basically took over the family business, eventually marrying Mary Ann McLeod, whose family later, but like both his father and his son. Fred Trump is a controversial figure known for his questionable business practices. But before I get into it, let me say up front, talking about the Trump family, it's difficult. Former President Donald Trump is by far one of the most figures of our time. Just last week, he was found guilty in a New York court on 34 felony charges. Reactions in the wake of this continued to be nothing short of polarizer. Okay, back to the Trump family. It was during World War II that Fred Trump started telling people that he was Swedish instead of German, since Germans were, for obvious reasons, very unpopular in those days. It was also during the war that Fred Trump started to make really big money by using federal subsidies to build housing for enable shipyard workers, and then later for returning veterans. But pretty soon, it became clear to the US government that Trump was making too much money and was making it too quickly. The feds investigated twice and found out that basically what he would do is overestimate the cost of a project, get federal money for it, and then use the profit for other investments. Technically, this wasn't illegal, so he wasn't at the charge. However, he was later sued for racial discrimination for supposedly going out of his way to avoid renting to blacks and other minorities. The folk singer, Would He Got Great? Even for this song about Fred called Old Man. Trump. Anyhow, the case was eventually settled with Trump's company agreed to better follow the Fair Housing Act. Okay, let me now about Donald Trump's mother and David Cloud's side of the family. They came from the Elder Heberdens, which are a group of violence that are a part of Scott. The earliest Trump ancestor that we have a photo of is his great-grandfather, Alexander MacLeod, son of a William MacLeod. He and his wife Annie were the parents of Malcolm MacLeod, who married Anna Smith, as you can see from the photos. They were simple folk who worked as tenant farmers. In order to get a living, they had 10 children, the youngest of whom was Mary Hatt. Marianne, Donald Trump's mother, was born in Scotland and spoke Gaelic as her first language. But at age 18, she integrated to the US, where a few years later she met and married Fred Trump. Together, they had 5 children. The eldest, Marianne, worked as a lawyer and then eventually became a judge. In fact, she was appointed by Bill Clinton to the US Court of Appeals, which is just one step down from the Supreme Court. Its older brother, Fred Jr., was originally slated to take over the Trump business empire, but he opted to become a pilot instead. Unfortunately, also became, and this contributed to this early dad, at age 42. He did, however, have 2 children and married Trump because Fred Jr. died. Before Red Sr., these 2 children expected to receive their father portion of the family world. However, they did not, which led to the lawsuit, at which point Donald Trump moves to help prove a medical bills, or Fred, that there's Williams, who was born with cerebral suit, was potentially 7. But the bad blood to this day. Mary is my Donald Trump's most vocal Chris, having helped the New Times with this article, and having published the book Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. Mary also happens to be the only openly gay close relative of Donald Trump. She and her ex-wife have 1 daughter together. Next up is Elizabeth Trump, Donald's only sibling that is currently still living. She generally stays out of the spotlight, but we do know that she's married to a James Ground, and that the couple has, children. Finally, there's Donald, passed away in 2020. Prior to this, he mostly worked for the family business. He married twice and had stepson but no children of his own. Which brings us to Donald Trump himself, the 4th child of Fred Sr. and the person who led the family business from 1971 to 2017. Changing its name to the Trump Organization from 2017 to 2021. He then, of course, served as the President of the United States. Trump has been married 3 times, his first light being the late Ivana Zelníková, a former model from the Czech Republic. Together, they had 3 children, Don Jr., Ivanka and Eric. While still married to Ivana, Trump had an affair with a young beauty contestant named Marla Maples. Eventually, he divorced him on and married Moreland, with whom he had his 4th child, Tiffany. That marriage lasted just 3 years, after which he started dating the Slovenian model Melania Canals, who is 24 years his junior. They married in 2005 and have 1 son named Baron. When Trump became president, Melania became First Lady and is one of only 2 First Ladies to have been born outside the United States. Let me now tell you about Trump's children. Currently, Don Jr. and Eric share the leadership of the Trump Organization for 13 years. Don Jr. was married to model Vanessa Hayden, who prior to 9/11 had been dating a sword prince together. Don Jr. and Vanessa have 5 children ranging in age from 7. Take note that his oldest son is named Donald, and his hence Donald Trump 3 currently. Don Jr. is engaged to former Fox News host Kimberly Guilford, who has been married twice before her first husband being Gavin Newsom, who is nowadays the governor of California. Take note that Kimberly is currently 55. which is 1 year older than her future mother-in-law, Melania Trump. Not know about Ivanka is that her legal name is actually Yvonne, just like her mother. You see, in Slavic languages, Ivanka means something like little Ivan anyhow. She's married to Jared Kushner during Trump's presidency. Jared served as senior advisor to the president, and Ivanka as advisor. This was seen as a conflict of interest, not only because they were close relatives of the president, but also because they both had businesses that benefited from their roles. Jared Kushner is the son of real estate developer Charles Kushner, who served time in prison for tax evasion and witness tamper. He in turn is the son of Holocaust survivor Ray Kushner when she immigrated to the US. Her husband took her last name pretending to be her brother. If that hadn't have happened, Ivanka's surname would now be Berkowitz, not Kushner, because she married into a Jewish family, Ivanka, as well, so that her children would be born in Jewish. Currently, they have 3 children, Arabella, Joseph and Theo. Eric is married to former TV producer Lavra Inuska, who is now the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. They have 2 children aged 7 and 5. Take note that all of the photos that I've used for the Trump grandchildren were posted publicly on Instagram by their parents. Tiffany Trump, who is now 30, got married in 2022. Her husband is Michael Boulos, the son of the Lebanese billionaire Mason Bullets, who owns a major company in Nigeria. Finally, there's Barron Trump, who recently graduated from high school and has sprouted to a remarkable height of 6'7". And this is where I need to return to Donald Trump's uncle John Trump. You see, there's a fun conspiracy theory that links John to Barron. Ever hear of Nikola Tesla? Well, Nikola Tesla also tried to invent a time machine. As far as we know, he never succeeded. But the keywords are, as far as we know. What we do know is that when Tesla died in 1943, the person tasked with going through his lab and papers was none other than Professor John Trump. We also know that in 1893, a book was published called Barron, Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. This has led some to speculate that John Trump may have secretly discovered its time machine. Might be a time traveler. Okay. Seriously.